Why dogs tilt their head. Watch a dog closely the next time you speak to them. Say something warm, say their name, say walk or treat or whatever word makes their ears lift. And there's a good chance their head will drift, almost involuntarily to one side. We've all seen it. We've all melted a little because of it. And for most of human history, nobody thought to ask why it happens. That changed only a few years ago, when a team of scientists in Hungary stumbled onto something strange while studying a completely different question. What they found suggests the head tilt isn't just cute. It may be one of the clearest windows we have into how a dog's mind works in the half second after you speak. And once you understand it, you'll never watch your dog listen to you the same way again. Why this behavior matters. Here's the strange part. Dogs have lived alongside humans for something like 20,000 to 30,000 years. We've studied their sense of smell, their pack structure, their loyalty, their play. But almost nobody had seriously studied the head tilt until recently. It was treated the way we treat a yawn, obviously real, obviously common, not worth a research grant. That gap matters because the head tilt sits right at the intersection of two things every dog owner wants to understand. What is my dog thinking, and is my dog actually listening to me? Most owners read the tilt as simple curiosity or assume it's about hearing better. Neither answer is entirely wrong, but neither is the whole story either. And because nobody had studied it, myths filled the silence. People guessed it was about seeing past the snout. People guessed shelter dogs did it deliberately because they knew it made humans soft. None of that had ever been tested. It took a team willing to actually film hundreds of hours of dogs listening to their owners before anyone had real evidence. What they found reframes the head tilt as something closer to a thinking gesture than a hearing gesture. And that distinction changes how you should respond to it. Think about how much of daily life with a dog is built around trying to read them correctly. You watch the ears, the tail, the eyes, trying to piece together what's going on behind that expression. Most of those signals have decades of research behind them. The head tilt, oddly, was a blind spot, a behavior so common it became invisible, the way you stop noticing a clock ticking in a room you sit in every day. That's part of why this particular discovery landed with so much attention when it was published. It wasn't just new information. It was a correction to something almost every dog owner thought they already understood. The science. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place, a study of what researchers call gifted word learner dogs, an extremely rare group capable of learning the names of dozens, sometimes over 100 individual toys. Most dogs, even well-trained ones, struggle to reliably learn the names of more than one or two objects. These dogs are the exception, and studying them gave researchers a rare comparison group. A research team led by ethologist Andrea Semez at Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest was testing these gifted dogs on their ability to fetch specific toys by name. While reviewing the footage, the team noticed something they had not set out to look for at all. The gifted dogs tilted their heads constantly while listening for a toy's name. So they went back and counted it properly. The numbers were striking. The gifted dogs tilted their heads roughly 43% of the time when their owner said a toy's name. Typical dogs, the ones who had not learned toy names, did it only about 2% of the time. That's not a small difference. That's a behavior almost exclusively associated with dogs who were actively recalling something specific. Even more telling, the gifted dogs tilted in the same direction regardless of where their owner was standing in the room. If the tilt were about locating a sound, which is the classic explanation, the direction should shift depending on where the voice came from. It did not. That single detail undercut the old theory and pointed towards something more internal. The dogs were not aiming their ears at a sound source. They were processing something. Semez has drawn a comparison to something humans do without noticing. When you are trying to recall a memory or picture something in your mind, you will often tilt your head slightly, unconsciously, as if giving your brain room to work. The theory is that dogs may be doing something structurally similar, tilting as they search for a mental image tied to a word. There's a second layer to the story, and it comes from more recent research. A 2025 study built on the toy name work by testing dogs under 4 different conditions: just resting, sitting in silent eye contact with their owner, hearing neutral, unfamiliar speech about a topic dogs never encounter, and finally hearing familiar words spoken warmly and with excitement. The head tilt showed up overwhelmingly in that last condition, not during silence, not during unfamiliar speech, but specifically when dogs were hearing language that meant something to them, delivered the way we naturally talk to someone we love. That's a strong signal that the tilt isn't triggered by sound in general. It's triggered by social, meaningful language. But, and this is where the story gets more interesting rather than less, the same research also found that dogs sometimes tilt their heads in response to a sudden surprise, like a jack-in-the-box popping open. That single finding opens a real scientific question that hasn't been settled. Is the head tilt fundamentally about processing language? Or is it a broader reaction to anything unexpected or attention-grabbing? Right now, researchers genuinely don't know for certain, and the honest answer is that both explanations may be capturing part of the truth. What your dog is really communicating. So what is actually happening in that half-second tilt? Based on the current evidence, here is the most likely picture. When your dog hears a word tied to something they care about, their name, walk, the name of a favorite toy, their brain appears to be doing real retrieval work, matching that sound to a stored memory or mental image. The tilt may be a physical side effect of that mental search, not unlike the way a person might glance upward or pause mid-sentence while trying to remember something. This means the tilt is less "I am confused" and more "I am concentrating." It is less a question mark and more a dog actively working to connect what you just said to something meaningful they already know. Context changes the meaning, though. A dog tilting their head while you say, "Do you want to go for a ride?" is likely retrieving a specific, exciting memory. A dog tilting their head at a strange new sound, a squeaky hinge, an unfamiliar ringtone, may be doing something closer to general alert processing, trying to figure out whether this new thing matters. And a dog who tilts consistently toward one side, no matter the situation, may simply have a dominant ear or a lateral brain preference, the same way most humans favor a dominant hand. The humbling part for owners is this: dogs do not need to be a gifted word-learning outlier for the tilt to mean something. Researchers suspect that even ordinary dogs are doing a smaller version of this same recall process. It is just harder to detect because they know fewer specific words to react to. Common myths. Myth: dogs tilt their head to see past their snout. This idea has circulated for years, and it is plausible sounding. Flat-faced breeds do have different sight lines than long-nosed breeds. But it does not explain why the tilt happens overwhelmingly during meaningful speech rather than during general visual tasks. And it does not explain why gifted word learner dogs tilt so much more than typical dogs. The evidence does not support this as the primary explanation. Myth: dogs tilt their head purely to locate where a sound is coming from. This one is intuitive, and directional hearing is real. Dogs do use head movement to triangulate sound in some situations. But in the toy name study, the gifted dogs tilted the same direction no matter where their owner stood, which argues against pure sound localization as the explanation for this particular behavior. Myth: dogs do it deliberately because they know it makes humans go soft. This theory has floated around dog training forums and shelter folklore for years, but no controlled study has ever tested or supported it. It is an appealing story, and dogs are certainly capable of learning behaviors that get attention, but attributing the head tilt to a calculated, manipulative strategy goes well beyond what the current evidence shows. Where the science is genuinely uncertain is whether the tilt is specifically about language processing or a broader response to anything novel or attention-worthy? This is not a settled question, and researchers studying it say so openly. It is rare and refreshing for a piece of dog behavior to come with this much scientific honesty attached. Most of what circulates online is far more confident than the actual data supports. What you should do. None of this requires you to change how you interact with your dog dramatically, but a few small shifts can make the most of what we now know. Watch for it as a sign of engagement, not confusion. If your dog tilts their head when you talk to them, that's a strong signal they're actively trying to connect your words to something they know. It's a moment of real attention, and a good one to reward with a consistent, clear follow-through, like actually producing the toy or activity you named. Use consistent words for things your dog cares about. The toy name research suggests dogs build these word-to-memory links through repetition with meaningful outcomes. If you want your dog to develop a rich vocabulary the way the gifted dogs did, using the same specific word every time for the same specific object, rather than swapping between ball, the round one, and your toy, gives them a real chance to build that association. Don't overread a single tilt, because researchers still aren't certain whether every tilt is about language or sometimes just about surprise. It's worth resisting the urge to assign deep meaning to every head cock. Look at the pattern and the context, not just the gesture in isolation. Avoid the guilt narrative entirely. Whatever the tilt means, it isn't a sign your dog is confused because you failed to communicate clearly, and it isn't a performance aimed at you. It's your dog's brain doing something interesting. There's nothing here that calls for correction or concern. A persistent, unusual tilt that doesn't go away, especially paired with stumbling or head shaking, is a different matter and worth a vet visit. But the ordinary responsive tilt is a good sign, not a warning sign. Give your dog room to think. Because the leading theory involves a moment of mental retrieval, resist the instinct to immediately repeat yourself or escalate your tone if your dog tilts and pauses before responding. That pause may be the exact moment the memory search is happening. Surprising facts and real-life examples. One dog in the original Hungarian study, a border collie named Whiskey, could correctly retrieve 54 out of 59 different toys by name, a level of vocabulary most owners would consider closer to a toddler's than a typical dog's. Whiskey's tilting behavior was one of the clearest examples researchers used to build their theory. The comparison numbers are almost hard to believe side by side. Gifted dogs tilted about 43% of the time when hearing a toy's name. Typical dogs tilted about 2% of the time. That's not a subtle difference. It's more than 20 times more frequent. The 2025 follow-up study also turned up a detail researchers are still puzzling over: a possible sex difference in tilting frequency, though only around 40 of the 103 dogs studied tilted at all. So scientists are cautious about drawing firm conclusions from that particular pattern yet. There's also a fascinating parallel between dogs and humans here. Just as most people have a dominant hand, dogs tend to have a dominant paw, and some research links tilt direction to which side of the brain is doing more of the emotional processing, with some evidence that the right side of a dog's brain is more engaged when processing praise and positive words. Whether tilt direction reliably maps onto that pattern is still being explored, but it's one more thread connecting this small gesture to something much bigger happening inside a dog's brain. Perhaps the most striking fact of all, an everyday behavior nearly every dog owner has witnessed thousands of times, sat completely unexamined by science until just a few years ago. Samiz has said plainly that what surprised him most wasn't the finding itself. It was realizing that in all the decades of canine research, nobody had ever properly asked the question. There's a wider comparison worth sitting with too. Head tilting and asymmetric behavior aren't unique to dogs. Many animals show a preferred side, whether it's a paw, a nostril, or a direction of turn, tied to which hemisphere of the brain is doing more of the work in a given moment. Seeing a dog's head tilt as part of that much older, much broader biological pattern, rather than as a quirky, dog-specific party trick, makes the behavior feel less like a cute accident and more like a visible clue to something ancient in how brains process the world. And there's something worth remembering about the gifted dogs themselves. Their talent for learning toy names isn't the point of the research, even though it's the flashiest detail. Researchers use them the way a physicist might use an extreme example to reveal a principle that applies more broadly, just too faintly to easily measure in an average case. The real subject of the story was never really how smart can a dog get. It was what is happening inside every dog, gifted or not, in the moment they hear a word that matters to them. Final takeaway. The head tilt isn't a performance, and it isn't confusion. The best current evidence points to something quieter and more remarkable. A brief, visible moment of your dog's mind at work, reaching for a memory the instant your voice gives it a reason to. It's easy to watch a dog for years and see only the surface, the tail, the bark, the tilt, without ever wondering what's underneath. But every one of those small, familiar gestures is a dog trying to close the enormous gap between two very different species who happen to love each other. The more closely we look at behaviors this ordinary, the more we find that our dogs have been telling us far more than we realized. We just weren't always watching closely enough to notice.